Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Munchetty and Charlie State, live at Westminster after a dramatic 24 hours in British politics.
Good morning. Our headlines, they do have some flashing images. Theresa May vows to fight on as she survives a crucial leadership challenge.
The Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
But the Prime Minister's authority is dealt a blow as more than 100 of her MPs vote against her.
A significant number of colleagues did cast a vote against me, and I've listened to what they said.
Her supporters have urged the party to move on, but her fiercest critics say the PM should resign.
Well, the Prime Minister may have won the support of her party, but does business have faith in her to deliver the Brexit deal that they want? I'm live in the City of London looking at what the financial world makes of the chaos in Westminster.
Also coming up this morning, French police ask for the public's help to find the man suspected of killing 2 people at a Christmas market in Strasbourg.
Manchester City win their Champions League group, but there's pain in Spain for United, who are well beaten in Valencia. They are through, but it's red faces all round.
And as Naga, Charlie and also Ben demonstrated, it's a day for the warm jacket out there. Pretty cold and biting wind across the UK. Staying cold tomorrow, but as it gets milder this weekend, could some of you see some snow? I'll give you all the details here on Breakfast.
Good morning. Welcome to a chilly morning in Westminster. It's Thursday the 13th of December. Here we're bringing you news that the Prime Minister is still in post and back in business this morning after surviving a bruising vote of no confidence which saw more than a third of her own MPs vote against her.
She'll be meeting EU leaders in Brussels later to try to win concessions on her Brexit deal in an attempt to break the deadlock at home and get her plan through Parliament.
What realistic chance does she have after last night's events? Well, Jonathan Blake looks back at an extraordinary 24 hours for Theresa May. His report does contain some flash photography.
Back to number 10 at the end of what Theresa May herself described as a long and challenging day, but it wasn't quite over yet. MPs had voted for or against Theresa May as Conservative leader, and the result, when it came, meant she survived.
The result of the ballot held this evening is that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
In the end, 200 MPs backed Theresa May, and 117 voted against her. The Prime Minister couldn't ignore the fact that a third of Tory MPs had voted to remove her as leader, but she said the result would let her get on with the job.
We now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country. A Brexit that delivers on the vote that people gave, that brings back control of our money, our borders and our laws, that protects jobs, security and the union, that brings the country back together rather than entrenching division.
Like the country, the Conservative Party is divided over Brexit. Supporters frame the result of the vote as a convincing win for Theresa May. Her critics said it was worse than she would have hoped and called on her again to resign.
The Prime Minister must realise that under all constitutional norms, she ought to go and see the Queen urgently and resign.
The Prime Minister survives this challenge to her leadership, but her biggest problems have not gone away. Getting changes to her Brexit deal from the EU and convincing enough MPs to support it. Jonathan Blake, BBC News, Westminster.
So let's run you through some of what happened last night. Theresa May won, of course, that vote of confidence. The result, she won by 200 votes to 117. Now that she's seen off that challenge, it means she's safe from another leadership contest for a year.
Last night she promised MPs that she'll stand down as leader before the next scheduled election in 2022. However, there could be a general election before that if Labour tables and wins a motion of no confidence against her government.
And on top of that, there is, of course, that delayed meaningful vote in Parliament. MPs, you can see on the calendar there, must vote on that deal, whatever shape it ends up taking. That'll be by the 21st of January.
We can talk now to our political correspondent Ian Watson in Downing Street. So she is there, Ian, for the moment, for this morning at least, before going on her trip to Brussels to try to garner more support and perhaps some change in the language to the deal that she will eventually present to Parliament.
Well, I've got some breaking news for you, Naga. She's not here. She's actually gone to Brussels. We saw a lot of her in the street yesterday here in Downing Street, but she went out the back way just about 5 minutes ago. Now, the question is, even though she won this confidence vote, for her, was that a disaster averted or a disaster delayed? Because to get that deal through Parliament, she is, as you say, going to need some concessions in Brussels. And strangely enough, her weakness within her own party might actually be her strength when she arrives in Brussels, because they've been negotiating with her for nearly 2 years. They know if they want to go on negotiating with her, she's facing calls for a resignation from inside her party, she's facing calls for a resignation from the opposition. If they want to try to get a deal over the line, potentially that might make them move a little bit more on this key issue of what's called the Irish backstop, the way of avoiding a hard border in Ireland. The difficulty is this, though. She said she was listening to those who'd voted against her, more than a third of her own party, and they want a legal guarantee that this backstop will in fact be temporary, and perhaps getting that written in stone, if you like, written in blood, is going to be a very uphill task for the Prime Minister, and therefore when she returns to Downing Street she may have the same trouble she had when she departed.
Indeed. OK, Ian, thanks very much. Ian Watson there for us at Downing Street.
Time now is 7 minutes past 8. Let's take you through the rest of the main stories this morning. 7 people have died and more than 40 are injured after a train crash in the Turkish capital of Ankara this morning.
Reports suggest a high-speed train crashed into a locomotive carrying out routine checks on the same track in snowy conditions. Our Turkey correspondent Celine Girit brings us the latest. Celine.
The Minister of Transport has made a statement in the last few minutes, and the death toll unfortunately has risen to 9 now. We're talking about 9 people who got killed in this latest train crash, and we're talking about 46 people injured, some of them very seriously. This is not the first train crash that has taken place this year in Turkey. Unfortunately, earlier in July, another train had derailed and 24 people were killed in that train crash, and many questions were asked following that train crash, and after this the same questions, similar questions will be asked as well, like who was responsible, why did this crash took place. The Ministry of Transport said that this was an accident, a collision took place, but especially the relatives of the deceased will be asking to learn more.
Celine Girit, thank you.
Hundreds of police, soldiers and border agents are involved in the hunt for a gunman suspected of opening fire near a Christmas market in Strasbourg. Sharif Chekat, who killed 2 people and injured 13 more in the attack on Tuesday evening. German police have also joined in the search after suggestions he may have fled across the border. Police are now asking for the public's help to locate the suspect, who they say was radicalised whilst in prison.
Thousands of people held candlelit vigils across New Zealand yesterday to remember murdered British backpacker Grace Millane. The 22-year-old was found dead more than a week after she was reported missing from a hostel in Auckland. Friends and family also gathered in her hometown of Wickford in Essex to pay tribute. A 26-year-old man will appear in court next month charged with her murder.
Albert Square has been the centre of a lot of drama over the years, but now there's outrage about how much a redevelopment of the set is costing. The BBC has been criticised by the National Audit Office for a £27 million overspend on the project, also likely to be completed 2 years late. The original set was built in 1984 and has now been deemed unfit for purpose. BBC says it's had delays with procurement and negotiating contracts.
Time now is 10 minutes past 8. It has been the most challenging 24 hours of Theresa May's political life. But last night, she fought off a no-confidence vote from her own party.
How, though, did it get to that point? Let's take a look back at the tumultuous events of the past few days.
Does this House want to deliver Brexit?
the vote definitely 100% going to happen?
Yes.
If we went ahead and held the vote tomorrow, the deal would be rejected by a significant margin. We will therefore defer the vote scheduled for tomorrow.
The government has lost control of events and is in complete disarray.
Other MPs will think carefully about whether Theresa May is the right person to lead us.
A ballot will be held between 6 and 8 o'clock. The Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
I'm pleased to have received the backing of my colleagues. Here is our renewed mission: delivering the Brexit that people voted for.
So we're joined now by the Conservative former Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Heseltine, who's in Banbury for us this morning. Very good morning to you, and thank you for your time this morning. I just wonder first if you could reflect for a moment on that moment when Graham Brady reached inside to his inside pockets and brought out the letter and read out that result. What did you make of those numbers?
I always believed that she would win a vote of confidence for the members of the Parliament on the Conservative side. I think it's uncomfortable for her, the number who voted against. Even more uncomfortable if you follow the argument that her payroll would have voted for her. I'm not sure that's right, but technically you'd think the government voted for her, which means that a very substantial number of her backbenchers didn't. But the fact is, I always believed that she would win that vote. But of course it's not the vote that matters. The vote that matters is the one that she hasn't put to the House of Commons. And there is no serious grounds for thinking she can win that vote. So the whole Brexit strategy is up in the air. And this is extremely serious because the clock is ticking. You have a Labour Party that have sort of neutralised themselves under the delusion they're going to get a general election. They're not going to get a general election, and as long as they hide behind that claim, Parliament won't move on. We have to have that deal on the floor of the House and voted on, and if it's rejected, as I hope and believe it will be, then Britain faces very serious and urgent consequences. And perhaps the most worrying thing of the whole thing is that it looks like as though the government is going to let Parliament go off for the Christmas recess, MPs having their mince pies and turkeys next week, without any indication as to how this crisis is going to be resolved. And I think that Parliament should make one hell of a row about the idea that they're being pushed off into the countryside whilst Britain hangs under this awful cloud of uncertainty.
Lord Heseltine, I'm sure you watched, as many people did, as she emerged from number 10, having heard that 117 of her own members of Parliament were against her, and they listened carefully to see if there was anything different in her message. Many people reflected that it sounded exactly the same as she said before. The only nod possibly was the line when she said, I am listening. But apart from that, it felt like exactly the same thing. Does she have to carry on regardless?
Well, look, one tries to stick to the issue, but there is an element of delusion about the Prime Minister. She keeps talking about uniting the country. There's no way she's going to unite the country. It is deeply divided. The whole of her party, the cabinet, are deeply divided, and that reflects public opinion. She talks about a deal that is good for Britain. She herself told us we should stay in Europe 2 years ago. Her own Treasury figures tell us it's worse for Britain. And it's just no good repeating all these slogans as though there's an element of truth in them. There isn't.
We are in unprecedented times, as you will know, given what you've witnessed in the past. One of the things that's been suggested is that if Theresa May has the backing of her cabinet for some form of new arrangement, she could consider bypassing the meaningful vote, possibly going straight to the nation to have a people's vote. Do you think there are options available there?
Well, yes, I think myself that in fairness to the negotiators on both sides and in fairness to the people who voted to leave, that Parliament should now give a decision on the deal that is available. I think that is constitutionally right. I'm assuming that they will reject the deal, and there's no sign yet of any change in Europe or any lessening of hostility in the House of Commons. So we would be left with no deal, and then the threat that that would then lead to Britain leaving Europe without a deal, which would be catastrophic. So I think that what needs to happen is for the Labour Party to realise it's not going to get an election, to join forces with a wide range of members of Parliament, including many Conservatives, and to go for a second referendum when the public, who now know a great deal more about the issues and the facts and the dangers, should be asked to either reaffirm their view or to change it.
Are you seriously suggesting that we just forget about the results of the first referendum?
No, I've told you that I think that Parliament should vote on the deal that is available. That is, I think, constitutionally right. It confirms what the referendum showed, that people wanted to leave. So very well, they have a deal in which we leave. But Parliament, of course, doesn't like that deal. So where do you break the impasse? And I can only see one way of doing it. That is to go back to the people and saying, look, here's the deal, these are the consequences. Are you still committed to leaving? If you are, then Parliament must be asked to support the deal that they've rejected. But if you want to change your mind, and my own view is that the evidence they will want to change their mind, particularly because there's so many more younger voters in the electorate now than there were 2 years ago, that in fact actually Britain will vote to remain in the European Union, which is incomparably politically, economically, socially in the interests of this country.
Lord Heseltine, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
So that brings us to 18 minutes past 8. I can officially confirm for you it is nippy out here at Westminster. I think we can show you rather glorious pictures. Cold, but it's bright and it's crisp and rather beautiful, as you can see. Matt, morning to you.
Morning, Charlie. Lovely sunrise view. Lovely sunrise here in Salford as well. But as you've mentioned, it is pretty nippy out there. What the shots don't show is what the wind is doing. A really cold feel across the country thanks to the strength of the wind. Added wind chill today. Tonight, it's going to be frosty as those winds fall lighter. But as things turn a bit milder through this weekend, it could be preceded by a spell of snow for some of you. So stick with me and I'll show you where that could be. Out there at the moment, though, as you said, pretty cold across the country. We've got some very cold, dry air coming in from Central Europe. High pressure in charge in Scandinavia. It's out to the west, though, where the winds are strongest, just ahead of this weather front, which is trying to introduce mild air. It feels miserably today anyway, but it will bring rain at times in Northern Ireland, far west of Cornwall, Isles of Scilly. Few showers too, Angus, Aberdeenshire and also into Shetland, but much of the UK, it's a dry start, bright enough start, increasing amounts of sunshine through the day. But whether you've got the sunshine or not, a strong southeasterly wind, strongest in the west, gusting 40, 50 miles an hour. And so whilst on the temperatures, they will be, on the thermometers, they're reading around 5 to 8 degrees. UK-wide, it will feel closer to freezing all day long. It is going to be one of those really nippy days if you're hanging around outside for any length of time. Now, tonight, though, the winds will fall lighter, and so a couple of things will happen. Skies will clear, temperatures will drop further. There will be a few showers still in the northeast of Scotland. Showers ease for a time in Northern Ireland and the far west of Cornwall. Temperatures may just hold up here, but elsewhere, the blues on our temperature chart, an indication that away from the city centres, temperatures well below freezing for many. And that cold air is in place as we start tomorrow, but the yellows here, milder air trying to creep ever closer towards us. It's not going to quite make it through daylight anyway on Friday. Maybe introducing more cloud to Northern Ireland, Cornwall once again. A few showers late in the day. Still some showers in the northeast of mainland Scotland towards Shetland. But really for most of you, it's going to be quite a pleasant winter's day. The winds will be lighter than today. Lots of sunshine around. Only a small chance of a shower or two towards East Anglia and the southeast at times as well. But note these temperatures, 3 to 6 degrees lower than today. but with lighter winds, so probably it's going to be a day that feels fairly similar. And then that final push of some milder air takes place into the weekend. Could be a few flakes of snow from these weather fronts through the night, not mounting to anything, but as this airflow pressure to the southwest of Ireland gets going, the wind's picking up across the country on Saturday. Bright enough start in the east, but clouding over quickly in the west. Outbreaks of rain developing, turning to snow over the higher ground of Northern Ireland. Parts of Northern England too, but it's more significantly set to turn to snow across Scotland, it looks like. Not just the hills, even to lower ground for a time. Impacts of that, we'll keep you updated, of course. Things could change, but still a cold day. Northern eastern areas milder towards the west, and all of us should be in the milder air as we go into Sunday. Say milder air, let's just call it a little less chilly. A few showers top and tail of the country, but at least Sunday will be brighter for many. But that's how it's looking out there today, though. As Charlie and Naga have been telling us, it's pretty cold outside. Back to you both.
Certainly is, Matt. Thank you very much.
Gorgeous view of Westminster there. This is where we are this morning. And of course, Theresa May has just left Downing Street in the last 20 minutes, heading for Brussels this morning in an attempt to negotiate concessions on her Brexit deal. Joining us now is Brandon Lewis, Conservative Party Chairman. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You're a supporter of Theresa May. Are you pleased with the result of the vote?
Yes, I think it's good we've got that behind us now, so we can all of us get back focused on delivering for people in the country. The Prime Minister is, I think, on a plane as we speak, just heading out to Brussels to continue the negotiations and get out to the European Council.
You say you can continue. There were 117, though, that weren't in support of Theresa May, that didn't have confidence in her as leader of the Conservative Party. Are those voices quelled?
Well, look, I think we also got to remember she got more votes than she did when she won the leadership campaign in 2016. We have a very clear set of rules in the party. That means that there is confidence in the Prime Minister from the party. I've had people overnight messaging me saying, look, I've had views, I was clear about their views on the PM. Some of them said they were going to vote against her, but they respect the decision of the party. We're a democratic party. We've all now got to come back together, get on with the job, delivering on Brexit, but also on the domestic agenda as well.
Nothing has changed, has it? Your government cannot get the Brexit deal through Parliament. That remains as it was.
Well, the Prime Minister was very clear earlier this week. It was very clear that there is views across Parliament, a whole range of things. There's people on the opposition benches particularly who want a second referendum, others want customs union, others have got issues about the backstop. We've got to deliver on Brexit. The Prime Minister has been clear about that. As somebody who represents a strong Leave constituency, I'm very clear that we have to deliver on that. We think this deal does do that, but we also recognise people have got concerns about this issue with the backstop. That's why the Prime Minister was out in Europe earlier this week. She was due to be in Dublin yesterday, but obviously had to be here. She's flying back out to Europe now. We'll continue those negotiations to look to get something legally binding that can satisfy people's concerns about the backstop. Then we can bring this issue back to Parliament and vote on it and get it through.
Well, I'd suggest to you that some people watching this and hearing what you're saying, it sounds like you're just not aware of the reality of what happens in that place. Because if she comes back with some notion, something written down which is not legally binding, there will still be the same number of people who say, for whatever reason, we're not going to vote for it. And then what? Well, can you give us a and then what?
Well, where I disagree with you is I think we are aware of the feelings of Parliament. So that's why we postponed and delayed that meaningful vote. Because it was very clear from the debate we're having the concerns that people in the House of Commons have got, primarily around this issue with the backstop.
Let me just ask
something
you,
has changed. Let's be very clear about this.
If I may, can I
ask one other question? The Prime Minister has said very clearly that what she wants to get is something that's legally binding to satisfy those concerns about the backstop. She does recognise that, was clear about that.
What is to stop us going through the same procedure as we've just been through with that meaningful vote cancelled at the last minute? If you're going into the Commons and you still think you haven't got the numbers, will you cancel it again, and then what?
Well, the focus is on getting a deal.
Understand that, but people want to know what will happen next.
Well, what will happen next is the Prime Minister says she wants to get something with the European Union that gives that legally binding assurance about the backstop that will satisfy colleagues' concerns about that. That can then go before Parliament. We get it through Parliament, we deliver on Brexit and leave on the 29th.
My question was, what happens if it doesn't go through?
Well, I've got to say, the focus has got to be on getting this deal done. If that doesn't go through, we end up with a whole range of possibilities, from no Brexit through to no deal, neither of which I think are good for the country. That's why this deal is so important.
Let's flip it on its head then. Theresa May comes back from her trip around the EU nations. She has a deal, and people still don't think it's going to go through. When are you told that this vote will happen?
Well, what we've outlined, it has to happen. We want this to happen before the 21st of January. So it will happen sometime between now and the 21st of January. And the timing of that will depend on when we get that agreement with the EU. Now, the Prime Minister's going out to Europe now, as I said. I think she's probably wheels up and in the air as we speak. I don't think this is going to happen over the next couple of days. I think we've got to be clear. This is going to take some time to negotiate. Something legally binding will take a bit of time. But between now and the 21st of March, we want to get this back on the floor of the House, get that vote, and hopefully, as I say, move on and deliver on Brexit.
Her leadership is damaged now, isn't it? There is also the threat of a motion of no confidence in government. How will she back that one?
Well, look, I think the reality, we've seen this on the floor of the House with PMQs just yesterday, where the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, very clear, they just want to cause chaos and disruption. And Jeremy said he'll vote against whatever she brings back from the EU, no matter what it is. We're very clear. We've got to be focused on...
It goes back to the same argument that Charlie was just making there. It's so unlikely that this vote is going to go through.
Well, Jeremy
so
Corbyn,
you have to have a plan as to what happens after that.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have the numbers on his own to defeat this.
Well, we've been speaking to the SNP and the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and they're willing to throw
even
their
if they all
support
come
in.
together, they still do not have the numbers to defeat this. But also, what we've always said is all of us as MPs, when this comes before the floor of the House, have got to look at what is in the national interest and actually make a decision about delivering on Brexit in a way that's good for the country. Look, what the Labour Party do, and if they do or don't call a vote of no confidence, is somewhat out of our control. They want chaos. We want to focus on delivering for people in the UK.
And can I just ask you on the issue of the meaningful vote, there has been some concern that that may not happen. As chairman of the Conservative Party, can you guarantee there will definitely be another meaningful vote?
There will be a meaningful vote. It will be before the 21st of January.
Brandon Lewis, Conservative Party Chairman, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It is time to get the news, travel and weather where you are this morning. We'll see you shortly.
Up next on the BBC News Channel, a look at what's happening in the world of global business with Business Live. And in half an hour, it's the news at 9 with all the latest stories.
Hi there, good morning. It's a much colder feeling day today across the UK. We've got a strong southeasterly wind. That's bringing in the colder air and it's going to feel really quite bitter out and about. Plenty of dry weather. There'll be some sunny spells developing across most parts of England and Wales. A few showers in the far northeast of Scotland, northeast England. A bit of rain at times for Northern Ireland and the southwest of England. Those are the temperatures you'll see on the app and the thermometers, but factor in that strong wind. Well, it's going to feel more like about freezing to 1 or 2 Celsius. Now, through this evening tonight, with some clear skies, it's going to be quite a cold night. Certainly, there'll be a touch of frost developing across many parts through into Friday morning. Less cold, though, for Northern Ireland, where you keep it a bit more in the way of cloud. But during Friday, for most of us, it's, again, going to be a dry day. There'll be some sunny spells. Still feeling cold, though. Maximum temperatures only really getting to about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Business Live from BBC News with Sally Bundock in Westminster and me, Victoria Fritz, in the studio.
Theresa May survives a bruising leadership challenge but is weakened. So what are the implications for her Brexit deal?
Live from London, that's our top story today, Thursday the 13th of December.
Theresa May is now heading to Brussels for an EU summit where she'll seek further concessions in an effort to salvage her Brexit deal.
But just how are political developments here in the UK being viewed at the heart of Europe? We'll be getting a reaction live from Brussels and also some analysis from our very own economics correspondent Darshini David. Today we want to know what you make of the last 24 hours. Do share your thoughts with us. Get in touch with me and the rest of the team using the hashtag BBCBizLive.
A very warm welcome to the programme, and we begin here in the heart of Westminster, where politicians are gathering once more this morning, the morning after the vote the night before, and the pound has steadied a little after the Prime Minister Theresa May managed to survive that leadership contest. But a third of her party's MPs did vote against her, and that does not bode well at all for her chances in Brussels as she resumes efforts to sell her Brexit deal to Parliament. As I said, she's now headed to Brussels to try and wring out further concessions. Attending an EU summit, she'll seek legally binding pledges from EU leaders on the Irish backstop, a key obstacle for MPs who oppose the Brexit deal. So let's have a look at how all of this has been playing out on the currency market. Sterling, of course, has been on the move since rumours of a confidence vote emerged late on Tuesday. Those reports saw the pound plunge in value to a 20-month low versus the dollar, but sterling then enjoying the best day it's had for 6 weeks on Wednesday. This in anticipation on the part of traders that Mrs May will survive the vote. Now, the gains were stalled when investors, market watchers started to digest the scale of the rebellion. When that became clear, i.e. the 117 that voted against her, that's when the pound started to tail back a little bit. Well, I'm joined by Silvia Dell'Angelo, who is a senior economist at Hermes Investment Management, for some more reaction. Silvia, give us your take on the last 24 hours and its impacts.
So the vote yesterday was really a distraction, and today we are back to the stark reality, which is that basically there's no clarity on the way forward. We have now a Prime Minister who has been weakened by the vote yesterday, which means in turn there's even a lower likelihood of her withdrawal deal to be approved by Parliament.
Business leaders have been talking to us this morning and saying they are just so frustrated by the last 24 hours. The distraction that it's caused, the fact that everybody is on edge, even more so now, and the Prime Minister seems to be even more weak than she was before. She's got to go back to Brussels. What are her chances?
Well, EU leaders have already been clear. Negotiations leading to the current withdrawal agreement has been long, and they have required considerable efforts from both sides. At this stage, it's really unlikely that they will make further concessions, apart from some marginal adjustments, marginal tweaks at the edges. Frankly, I don't think that her trip to Brussels will be particularly fruitful.
What are your clients saying to you about all of this, and what advice are you giving, given the lack of insight we have on what's ahead, and everybody says, everybody hates uncertainty. We've got that by the bucket load.
Well, the UK is typically a very dynamic economy, and so there are clearly several opportunities for investors, but at the moment, because of the uncertainty lingering, our clients are really on the sidelines, so waiting for more clarity.
Where are the opportunities? Do tell.
Well, I would say the equity market looks quite undervalued at the moment.
Which one are you talking about?
I would say in general, because of this uncertainty. So I'm sure that if there is any clarity, there's also upside for UK assets. But I mean, that doesn't seem to be the case right now.
FTSE 250 companies? Are you talking about companies that have been really sold off, those companies that are exposed to the domestic economy?
Yes, definitely, because the FTSE 100 is more exposed to external demand, but for more domestically centered firms, which have suffered the most from this Brexit uncertainty, I think that there's more upside going forward. But again, as long as we don't have uncertainty, that's not going to...
And if we crash out of Europe?
Well, I would attach still a low probability to that scenario, but of course it can happen by accident. And of course, at that stage, there would be probably more downside for, I'd say, all UK companies. And that's, I think, is something that policymakers should take into account going forward.
Silvia, thank you so much. I appreciate it's really hard to look ahead at this stage and try and predict what might happen next. Silvia Dell'Angelo, Victoria, back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Sally. Let's speak now to Alessio Terzi, who's the affiliate fellow at the economics think tank Bruegel in Brussels. Alessio, in Belgium, I understand the newspapers are calling this a Pyrrhic victory, a victory that inflicts such devastating consequences and such a devastating toll on the victor that it's tantamount to defeat. Is that how you regard it?
I mean, the reason why, to my understanding, it's being called a Pyrrhic victory is that, yes, Theresa May gained some time and some leeway by winning this vote, but the Conservative Party also emerged as extremely divided, and so this precludes most likely a defeat in the House of Commons for the withdrawal agreement. So short-term victory, but no long-term solution to the underlying problem.
That doesn't sound like anything we didn't know on Monday or Friday, for example, of last week.
Look, from Brussels, where I sit, it is being extremely complex to understand the sausage factory of the House of Commons, which looks really like a black box. From here, there is a lot of political tactics, but the underlying problems, the red lines, and the legal situation with the European Union has been the same now for months. So it is not clear how this will be solved by short-term tactics.
Now, the Brexit minister in the last few moments has said that there needs to be a recognition, or there is a recognition from both sides, that the backstop is a concern, saying that it is his intention not to walk away with no deal. Just how helpful can and will Theresa May's European colleagues be in the next few days?
Look, I think that all European heads of state and government want, or absolutely do not want, a hard Brexit, so they'll try to be forthcoming with Theresa May. They have also engaged in an exercise of expectations management. We have heard Chancellor Angela Merkel say that the legal text of the withdrawal agreement will not be changed. The President of the European Commission has said that the legal text will not be changed. The European Parliament, everybody is saying the legal text will not change. What they can do is give some reassurances in a political declaration and say we all agree that it would not be ideal to activate the backstop. The backstop is there, hopefully never to be used, but it shouldn't be the baseline scenario. This is what they can say.
OK, Alessio, thank you very much. We've had black boxes and sausage factories of Parliament. We've got it all going on here on Business Live. Let's take a quick look at some of the other stories making the news today. And reports that Chinese researchers working in sensitive high-tech sectors have been warned against travel to the US following the arrest of the Huawei executive in Canada. The tech firm's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, was arrested in Vancouver on the 1st of December. She was granted bail earlier this week, but could still be extradited to the US to face fraud charges. Still with China, a state news agency in the country says a second Canadian citizen who has been reported missing by the authorities in Canada is now being investigated on suspicion of harming national security. The businessman Michael Spavor has contacted Canadian officials this week to say he was being questioned. And South Korea's car maker Hyundai says it plans to provide funding worth $1.5 billion to stabilize management of its suppliers. The funding is designed also to support research and development and innovation by those suppliers.
Now let's talk some more about financial markets, because whilst certainly everybody here, right outside the Houses of Parliament, isn't it looking gorgeous today with the sun coming up, are completely obsessed with the politics, with Brexit, with the UK economy, with business. But actually, when it comes to the global financial markets, I have to say their attention is on what's going on between the US and China when it comes to trade talks. And it would seem we've had a few positive developments that's given markets around the world a bit of a boost. Let's go to Mariko Ooi. She's on a trading floor in Singapore. Mariko, tell us a little bit more about the day in Asia. I know people were watching sterling, but more importantly, they were watching the US-China trade talks.
That's right, Sally. Of course, Asian markets were the first to react to the result of that leadership challenge. The result was announced at 5 a.m. local time, and a few hours later, some of the major markets here in Asia started trading, and they actually opened higher. And of course, we're wrapping up for the day, and I have to say, we've had a pretty decent day. Japan's Nikkei ended the day 1% higher, and that's because, as you mentioned, investors are now looking at the US-China trade war that Beijing might be trying to ease the tensions with the United States, and that's why we had some positive reaction. A trader that I spoke to earlier today here told me that he's not been asked at all about the UK. It was all about the US-China. Of course, uncertainties do remain over Brexit, as you were talking to your guest about it. Should there be a hard Brexit, the no-deal Brexit? Of course, that would have a huge impact on Asian markets, especially financial shares. But for now, Asian investors just waiting to see what happens next when it comes to Brexit, and more focusing on other issues like the trade war.
OK, thanks very much, Mariko. Let's get some more reaction news here in London. The trading day in Europe is about 41 minutes old. Theresa May, of course, surviving the vote of no confidence late on Wednesday. We can cross now to Kim Kittelson, who is live for us in the offices of Peel Hunt. Kim, what's going on? First 40 minutes of trade, what are you seeing?
So it's busy but not frantic here, and I think that's because a lot of traders have been telling me that they kind of expected this outcome. But I don't need to tell you that. I'm joined by Charles Hall. He's the Director of Research here. He's going to answer some key questions that we've had, which is why, if we were expecting this vote, have we seen sterling trend higher this morning? Why are we seeing it strengthen against the dollar, against the euro?
Good morning. Well, the main thing is that we haven't descended into the chaos of a leadership vote during the Brexit negotiations, and so that is a positive for sterling. Clearly, we haven't got any resolution of what's actually going to be the outcome of Brexit, so it's gone marginally higher, but at least it has moved in a positive direction.
Now, is sterling the main thing that you've been focusing on when you're trying to get a sense of investor sentiment about where we are in the Brexit process, or is there something else that you're paying attention to, bonds, equities?
Well, bonds and equities, and bond yields have been dropping, so that's a feeling that UK growth is going to slow. And of course equities, and there have been a lot of companies reporting over the last few months. Most of them are a lot more cautious than they were earlier in the year, and so we can really see that turning up both in the earnings momentum, but also their comments on how they're preparing for Brexit and what it might mean for them.
That is the question going forward. Theresa May has survived this confidence vote. But what does that mean for the Brexit process? Many have said that this was kind of a sideshow and we're sort of back to where we were earlier in the week.
I think it's more than a sideshow. I think this is actually quite important for two reasons. Firstly, this was really a vote driven by people who wanted a hard Brexit, and they've lost. So that strengthens Theresa May's hand. The other key reason is that she no longer faces being defeated by her own party and having to stand down. So for two key reasons, she now has a stronger hand to go into negotiations with the Europeans over Brexit negotiations. But clearly, she's got to be able to get it through Parliament, and we're a long way from that.
I mean, does that mean that this roller coaster ride that we've been on with sterling is kind of coming to a bit of an end right now?
Yes, the roller coaster is probably getting to a smoother patch, but we can still go up and down a long way from here.
Well, Charles Hall, thank you very much for your time this morning. Back to you, Victoria.
OK, thanks very much, Kim. Now, still to come, we'll be getting more analysis on the economic and business impact of the developments of the past 24 hours with our economics correspondent, Darshini David.
Yes, we'll bring you all the reaction from Westminster too, as Theresa May resumes her battle to sell Brexit to British MPs. She's now headed to Brussels to with Business Live from BBC News.
Well, we've been hearing how global markets have reacted to the chaos in Westminster, but what does this mean for just ordinary people? Ben Thompson has been out on the streets of London to find out.
Welcome to Leadenhall Market here in the City of London, and this place, what it's survived, world wars, great fires, deep recessions, And the businesses here just get on with things. But what do they make of the last 24 hours? And are we any further forward in those negotiations? Any further forward in giving clarity to business that has faced so much uncertainty during this Brexit process? Well, with me is Claire Barrett. She's a personal finance editor of the Financial Times. Claire, morning.
Good morning.
We're no further forward, are we? This is a problem. Business still has no more idea about what's happening than they did 24 hours ago.
Yeah, certainly. And if you were running a business the way the current government is running the Brexit process, then I don't think it would be trading for very long. What businesses really want, more than anything else, is certainty. They've had to put up with the shifting sands of the Brexit negotiations for more than 2 years now, and the vote last night really hasn't solved anything. The majority that Theresa May managed to secure was not a very convincing one. There's still the threat of a vote of no confidence maybe coming from the opposition, and frankly there are lots of doubts, including in the currency market, that this will take us any further forward.
What does that uncertainty look like day to day for business? It's easy, isn't it, for us to talk about headline numbers and the big picture, but what does it mean day to day?
Well, there was lots of economic data out on Tuesday which showed that domestic companies in Britain are pretty much grinding to a halt, so jobs are not being created. People are delaying decisions until after March. Maybe that's spending on a new fleet of vans or a new advertising and marketing campaign, taking on new people, even giving existing workers a pay rise. If you don't have to spend money, why would you? And the danger is that that will now transfer to the consumer.
Claire, for now, thanks so much, nice to see you. So there you have it, business clearly has a lot still to contend with, lots of questions that still don't have any answers. Whether we will get those, of course, there's a long road ahead. More from us a little later.
Ben there in the city for us. Now, there are other stories that aren't Brexit related, and I found one for you about slime. Hamleys, the toy store, has stopped selling a children's slime toy after the product failed a safety test for boron, a chemical that can actually impair fertility. There you go, plenty more on the tablet. Special welcome back to Business Live from Westminster. Sally is there. She's managed to find a seat, I'm glad to see, and I'm here in central London in our studio. Our top story, the British Prime Minister Theresa May is resuming her efforts to salvage her Brexit deal after surviving a bruising leadership challenge.
Yes, she is now on her way back to Brussels, where she'll be meeting with EU leaders to try and get further concessions on what's become known as the Irish backstop. That's to try and avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. But I have to say, here in Westminster, hopes are pretty low right now that she may get the concessions she needs.
Let's have a quick look at the markets and how they're faring at the moment. And stocks have been fairly positive, but as you can see, the rally very much ebbing away, momentum ebbing away. Caution has returned to the European trading day. Investors assessing the latest in trade relations between the US and China. And the pound has been drifting upwards, currently 126.7 against the dollar. Now, hundreds of column inches and broadcasting hours, of course, have been dominated by Brexit this week. But what's the end game for Prime Minister Theresa May, who heads to Brussels this morning for an EU summit after surviving a vote of confidence? Well, I'm joined now by Darshini David. You've been looking at all of this and the economic picture of all of this. The CBI called the last 24 hours a chaotic detour. They represent, what, 90,000 businesses or something. Do you think any of this changes the risk profile of the UK?
It's really interesting, isn't it, Victoria? We've had a whole range of views this morning, and you talk to people in the city and they say things like, yesterday was this gripping soap opera from Westminster, now we're back to business as usual. But that soap opera, of course, has exposed all sorts of fault lines in a dysfunctional family that is our ruling party. And what that means, when you look at the currency in particular, business as usual means that we're going to see the kind of volatility that we're perhaps more used to seeing from emerging markets currencies. What about bricks and mortar businesses? What does this mean for people who are actually having to put their money where their mouth is, frankly, for the next few months? Make plans, because the clock is now ticking. We talk about 100 shopping days to Christmas. We are not talking about 100 days to Brexit. So what do they do? Many business leaders are saying to us we're having to press the button on contingency plans that we didn't expect to have to make. And that's a bit like buying an umbrella. You know, it doesn't matter whether it rains or not after that. You've spent the money. That's money gone. So that's money they perhaps can't spend on other things. So that disruption is very real. Some businesses are saying to us, well, this affects our hiring plans going forward as well. And you'd expect to see that impacting on employment figures in the coming months, all of which could make investors quite nervous.
Is it too late to be buying umbrellas? I mean, surely we know there's always a rainy day in Britain.
Well, I think the way the weather's turning at the moment, we should be buying something a bit more weatherproof than that. But is it too late? Well,
in terms of contingency planning, I mean, nothing really has changed for months now.
Nothing has changed, and I think that is the big problem, because businesses, we were told that actually we would have plans in place, we would have a bit more certainty about what lies ahead. Very few people expected to be at this stage and not have an idea of what's going to happen in 3 months' time. And if you talk to, even the Treasury Select Committee has flagged up that they are alarmed at how little communication there has been, even to businesses who just trade with the EU. And that is incredibly alarming as well. I mean, you know, this week Whitehall said they were recruiting more civil servants to help plan for the eventuality. Businesses don't have that luxury of saying, right, particularly smaller ones, that we can ramp up our contingencies at this very late time. So it's pretty worrying.
Yeah, it is pretty worrying. I mean, where does all of this, do you think, leave the prospects for the UK economy and, as you say, jobs and wages and income, the things that affect everyone in their everyday lives?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at what's going on in the economy at the moment, it's a really fascinating picture, because we've got the highest wage growth now for 10 years in the UK. Finally, we're able to say, well, look, we've left the financial crisis behind. Households are feeling better off. Employment at an all-time high. It's the kind of headlines that politicians love to talk about. On the other hand, we are now seeing growth perhaps on schedule this year for the weakest outcome perhaps since 2010, and that underlines how this uncertainty is keeping a lid on activity in the UK, a lid on investment, a lid on output, and that, as I'm saying, could feed into hiring plans, into wage growth in the new year as well. So it's unsurprising that investors are feeling a little bit nervous. But if we get a deal, if we do see a very smooth reaction to that as well, the picture could change quite dramatically.